Good morning everyone, and welcome to Steel Force Welding and Forge. Today I've got a special video for you. I finally bought myself a wire welder. I bought myself the Vulcan Migmax 215, and today I'm going to be doing an unboxing, a demonstration, and review video for you folks. Now we're going to be going pretty fast, otherwise the video is just going to be way too long. So let's go ahead and get started with the unboxing. It looks like we're going to have a guest here in just a second. Buddy. Alright, instruction booklet. Foam inserts, gear bouncing around. Here's the main unit. Looking very nice. Let's go and get this out of the way. The main reason I decided to pick this baby up is because business has been booming at Steel Force. Getting stove orders like crazy, and quite frankly I'm having a hard time keeping up with just my TIG welder. So hopefully this is going to give me, increase my productivity. Ground clamp in here. Ooh, look at that. So it's got all of our settings in here that we need. They do mention here about switching the polarity over if you're using flux core, which I will be using. And this welder does have something called Synergetic Settings. What that means is when you select the options here for your wire size and your wire type, it will and your your parent metal size. This welder will automatically adjust to have the proper wire feed speed. I've been told, however, that it's a bit hot on thinner material, which is what I'm going to be using. My stoves are 14 gauge, so we'll see how that works out in the shop. What else we got here? There's our wire tension. Oh, good. Our drive rollers here are metal. I know on some of the other cheaper versions of the welders they have at Harbor Freight, they are plastic drive rollers. Thankfully we don't do that with these. Alright, let's put you aside. Let's see what's in here. So I got a box within a box. Here we have our regulator for shielding gas, an adapter. Now on my Vulcan Pro TIG machine, I thought that the regulator was kind of cheap. Turns out I was wrong. It's actually a fairly decent regulator. So if you want to use a solid mix or a solid core MIG wire and shielding gas setup, you would use this guy. If you're at home welding, typically people use a 75 argon 25 CO2 mix. It's a lot cheaper as opposed to the 90 argon 10% CO2. Instructions on the regulator. You got the gas line. We're using the shielded gas, or shielding gas. We're done with that for now. What do we have here? This is a knurled groove drive roller. I'm guessing it's probably V-groove. Yes, it is. So this is what we'll be using for the flux core wire. And a sheet metal gauge. These guys are super handy. I have one of these already from my Pro TIG. This is the, looks like 110 power supply cord. This would be 220. I did have 220 put into my garage. I can tell you what, it makes a big difference. So if you want to do some serious welding in your garage, consider having a 220 line put in on its own separate breaker. Since I've done that, I've never tripped a breaker with my welder in the house. Then here we got our Mig Gun. It's not a bad gun. Doesn't feel cheap, like if I drop it, it would break. Looks like the nozzle has a built-in insulator with just this little kind of spring coil on here for tension. That's not bad. Again, I've seen some pretty cheap setups in the past. This one doesn't feel too bad. And then we have some tips in here, as well as a bit of a different nozzle here. So O30 tips. Yep, both O30. And then this guy, if you're using the flux core setup, since you're not using a shielding gas, looks like you can just throw that guy right on there and get into some tighter spaces. But tell you what though, you don't want to touch that to your parent metal, otherwise you'll probably short your welder out and probably destroy your tip. So we'll put this one back on for now. And since I'm not using shielding gas right now, well, actually I may. Maybe I'll just hook up my argon tank to this welder to see how it runs. So, there you go. There's the unboxing portion of our video. Next, we'll head out into the shop and we'll go ahead and set this thing up and do some welds. Alright everyone, we're back. Again, videography is not my forte, so I'm going to try and do the best I can here and give you guys the best walkthrough that I can. So, we're going to go ahead and open this guy up. Now, I'm going to be moving kind of fast because, again, if I don't, this video is going to take forever. So, we're going to go ahead and set this guy up for O35 flux core wire. So, for this particular welder, to use the 2-pound spool here, we have to remove this setup right here. Because this is for the 10-pound spool. And then put this guy on. But before we do that, before I forget, we actually need to remove our old drive roller here. we're just going to loosen this plastic cap here. The drive roller pops right off. And we're going to go ahead and put on our O35 Knurled V-groove roller. So if you look at a drive roller, see right there that says O45? That means if I were to take this right now and put it with the O45 facing me onto my welder, this would have the O45 V-groove knurled roller on my wire. We don't want that, we want the O35. So I'm going to turn it over. So it says O30, O35, and put that right on. Now there is a groove cut into this drive wheel. So this has to go on a specific way. We got that on. Put our cap back on. Now, because we are doing flux core, we want to have DC electropositive. What that means is we want to, DC electronegative. What that means is the polarity coming from our gun, which would be this one right here, that's by the drive roller, we want that to be negative. So we want to switch these two here. Because currently it is set for DC electropositive. That is what we want for solid core MIG wire. So we're going to go ahead and switch these around. Let's see. Actually, I think the best way to do this would be to remove these wing nuts down here, which, my goodness, are really on there. All right, I want to bring you guys in closer so you could see this. So when I was going to switch the polarity around on this, there were a couple things. One, this nut right here, this bolt, was very, very tight. I tried to loosen it with a screwdriver, couldn't do it. Ended up needing a 7mm socket to get it off. So I loosened that. Then there wasn't quite enough length of the cable for this ground to move it from the negative to the positive position. I had to move it. Well, you may not be able to see it, but there's a bracket right here. And this bracket was so tight that look what it did to the wiring on this ground. Absolutely crushed it. I don't know who in their right mind would do that, but that is a big no-no. So hopefully that doesn't become an issue down the line somewhere. So I just removed that bracket, put it back on. I'm going to leave this loose. I'm assuming that bracket is there, so if you were to say, like, step on this cord, you don't rip it out. Well, between that or crushing it and being able to switch it, I'm just going to take it off for now. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on the positive setting for the DC electropositive, like so. I'm sorry, then, yes, the positive for DC electronegative. And these wing nuts were also extremely tough. So I'm just going to hand tighten them. Going to take the cable that's on the gear drive here, which is where your gun is, on the negative for the DC, to have DC electronegative. Have a DC electronegative setup. Go ahead and just hand tighten that wing nut like so. Alright, and then I'm going to come back here and just ever so slightly tighten that nut, just so it's not spinning in there. But I mean, it's just not even snug. Okay, so that's done. I'm going to back you up here a little bit. There we go. See, I'm super professional. Now, go ahead and take the wrapping off of this O35 flux core wire. So I poke a hole right there in the back, the side. Now the wire that's on here is curled in this direction. When we have this on our machine, we want it to feed in that direction as well. So the wire goes straight from the wire into our machine. If we have this the other way, the wire will have to loop down, come into our machine, and that will create drag. We do not want that. So we're going to put it on this way. Go ahead and throw that on. Looks like there's a little nut here. Put that on first. And then put the wing nut on as well. I don't have to crank down on this guy. We're just going to have it snug. That's all we need. Now, here is something important for first-time welders. Whenever you are putting a new spool of wire on, make sure you always have your hand on the wire. Never let it go. This spool is actually under a little bit of tension. If you let go, it'll just completely unravel. And then it's no good. You have to cut off the portion that's unraveled and throw it away. So, go ahead and curl it a little bit. We're going to snip the end of the wire off. We want it to be nice and clean. We're going to feed it through this liner right here. It's going to go through the drive wheel or across the drive wheel. Actually, let's back that out. Let's straighten that wire up a hair so it goes through straight. There we go. Put it through that liner, across the drive wheel. And it's catching on this other piece of wire I had on there. That was the problem. All right. Feed it into this little collet right here. Keep feeding through. Pretty soon I'll see it come out the back here. Okay, now I'm going to close this top drive wheel, put the tension on. Now you can let go. It's going to be just fine. Okay, so it looks like we have just about everything in here set up and ready to go. Now we're going to get the Mig Gun set up. So here's your Mig Gun. We're going to go ahead, take this end here. We're going to loosen this wing nut right here. We're going to want to loosen it quite a bit. Now, if you'll notice on here, there are these holes on the side here with these O-rings. These are for your shielding gas. If you have shielding gas, it's pumping through the machine, out here through the to this gearbox, and then into these holes. So if you have this set up for shielding gas, you want to make sure you absolutely have this all the way in the machine so that it creates a seal with these O-rings and you don't have a leak with your gas. That's not going to be an issue with us. We're doing flux core, but still, you want to get in there all the way. So I'm going to go ahead and feed that wire in through the front of this. Go ahead and just shove this guy in there. Alright, and it's all the way in. You can see that plastic is flush to that gearbox. Go ahead and tighten this nut down. You don't want to crush it, just snug. We're good to go. Now, in front of this, you'll see we have this plug. This plug is what provides power to the trigger on our gun. If you don't have this plugged in, when you pull this trigger, nothing will happen. So down here on our machine is a plug for this. We're going to take this guy and plug it in down here. Now you want to put this on very gently and take your time to match up the plugs on here to the plugs on here. All you do is just kind of spin it and use some slight pressure to push it in, and when it does line up, you'll feel it kind of pop in like that. Then there's a washer on the outside of this, or a nut. You just spin it, lightly push in, and that will tighten itself. And then you don't need to even put a pair of pliers or anything on this. Just hand tight is all you need. So that is all plugged in. Now, for our tip, this one right on here is an O30 tip. This is for O30 wire. We're using O35, so we need to change this. Go ahead and take this off. And if you are able to see it, right there, that says O30 on that tip. I don't think she's going to focus, but it's right there. It's engraved down there. Set this to the side. And I believe this is my O35 tip right here. We're just going to go ahead and put this on. And with just very slight pressure, just going to give that a little twist. Don't need much. Now, I know we have a separate nozzle for the flux core. We're just going to go ahead and put the gas nozzle on for now. Alright, so it looks like we are just about ready to go here. I think I'm going to go ahead, change the camera position, put this guy in its home, and then we'll finish the installation. Okay, we're back. Sorry about the poor lighting. Again, welder, not a videographer. So we're going to go ahead and hook up the power supply here. Now, I do have 220 in my garage. If you decide to do some serious welding in your own home, I highly recommend at least having 220. And you can run this on single phase, no problem. You start getting welders bigger than this, and you're going to need 3-phase welding. So just keep that in mind if you do decide to purchase a larger machine. So we're going to go ahead and plug this into the back of the machine. Now these plugs are a little bit different. When you put this plug in your machine, you have to push in and turn, and that in a sense locks it in place so it won't get yanked out. Just turn it until you feel it go on, and then just give it a little turn. You're ready to go. Just going to fish this around the back and plug it in. Position this. This is going to be this guy's home for a while. I didn't think I'd be purchasing a wire welder this soon. Steel Force is actually doing very well. So I'm glad that's happening. At the same time, I'm having a tough time keeping up with my orders. I had a customer come in this weekend to have the brackets on an axle moved. Boy, was that I'm glad I got some big hammers around here, because those brackets did not want to come off. And I've got 5 stoves to build in the next like 2 weeks. One stove averages about 3 hours of work. You know, TIG welding those stoves takes a long time, so I'm hoping this increases my productivity. So we have the everything's ready to go. We just need to feed our wire through our Mig Gun to get it finished. Now, typically what you would do is you would stretch this out straight so you lose. So you reduce the chances of there being a kink in your line and the wire kinking in the liner. That's probably not going to happen. And also, this does have a cold wire feed button, so if you push this button, the wire will feed, but it will not be hot. Versus if you pull this trigger, it'll be hot. So if you accidentally strike at ground, it's going to and you'll be blind. So we're going to go ahead and turn the power on. And it is turning on, so that is good. Just going to hold this out as straight as I can. Ooh, that's fast. I like that. Some wire feed speeds are too slow. Now I just want to watch it and make sure it doesn't all of a sudden just stop. You feel for it in the gun. I can feel it now. It should pop out any second. Okay. Felt it stop. It's probably hung up somewhere behind the tip. Let's go ahead and take that tip off. You just keep running this thing. You're going to wear your wire down as well as possibly have it bunch up and create a bird's nest. See? It's right there. Maybe I put a bit of a burr on this when I nipped it. Put that through. Go ahead and tighten that down. Be very careful not to pull the trigger while you're doing this. These wires are sharp. It will go straight through your finger. Trust me, I know. And you got to worry about infections. Okay. No power on the trigger. 30 flux core, wire feed speed. There we go. Now it's moving. So it looks like we're ready to rock and roll. All right, we'll go ahead and do a few welding demos. Then I'll give you my final thoughts on how this guy is, or how it's working, I should say. So before we start tacking, I'm going to go ahead and take this nozzle gel here, and I'm going to take my nozzle, just because this thing is brand spanking new, I don't want to mess it up. I'm just going to dip it into this dip here cold. Now typically you do this while this is hot, but I don't want to get this nozzle all nasty before I manage to clean it off. The only problem is you can see now there's all this gunk in there. We do not want to get that in our welds, it will contaminate it. Okay, so what I'll do is when this gets hot, I'll dip it again. Now when you're tacking, you typically what you do is you turn up your heat and you turn up your wire. This way you can just zap, pull your trigger really quick and you get a nice hot tack. I'm not familiar with this welder, so I'm not exactly sure how well this is going to work. And plus, flux core, if you have little tacks, sometimes they tend to get porosity. So we're going to see. I also have the Synergetic Settings set to manual on this welder. I don't want this thing to automatically figure out my settings. I know I want it hot, I know I want a lot of wire. So we're going to go ahead and put 3 little tacks on here, and we'll see how it looks. Try that again. Let's try another corner here. Some of that might just be that anti-spatter cleaning off. It's 1 tack. It's a little bit better. Looks like I need a little more wire. So I've just about got the wire setting maxed out. I'm going to put my helmet on too. Okay, we're back. I've got my helmet back on. Now I'll be able to actually see what's going on. Let's hit this again. There's 1. So as you can see, those tacks are all right. Little dirty, but not terrible. This is flux core. Flux core is a dirty process, but it's a lot faster than TIG welding, which is why I opted for this wire feed welder in the first place. Just putting these stoves together was just taking way too long. They're starting to get a little bit popular right now. In fact, I've got 3 orders to fulfill and possibly a order for 5 stoves here pretty soon. So gotta get that production up. Again. Really got to pull on that trigger. These tacks are a little bit better. Going. Ooh, that is so much faster. I just about have that wire feed maxed out, and whew, I am just getting enough wire on there to get a decent tack. Alright, so I'm going to grab a chipping hammer really quick. Doesn't look too bad. You know what? We'll hit those with a wire brush really quick just to see how they look. This is the one disadvantage of flux core, is you do need to remove all that slag beforehand. So there we go. See? Nice, hot, small tacks. Alright, so let's go ahead and lay some beads down here and see how they look. So one thing with flux core, whenever there's slag, you drag. What that means, instead of pushing my weld this way, I'm going to drag it this way in the opposite direction. If I don't do that, the flux will not sit well, and I may get a porous weld. Let's go ahead and lay some beads and see how that looks. Definitely a little on the hot side, especially there on the ends. I think for the next pass, I'll put a little tack there on the end. I did burn through a little bit. Oof, I'll have to build that back up and fix that. All right, let's hit up the wheel. So not too bad. Looks like I was a little slow in the start of my weld. And I definitely need to tack my ends there. Looks pretty good. Let's do one more here. Got a tack there on the end, so hopefully I won't burn through this time. Still did. Looks like we need just to turn that heat down just a hair. Okay, not too bad. Again, still looks like I'm going a little slow there at the beginning. I think maybe I just need less heat, less wire, same speed. Try one more, turning the wire speed down just a little bit. Beef up that weld there in the end this time. Voila, no burn through that time. Let's go ahead and dip that nozzle while it's hot. That's what you want. See how that just melts right off? Now, since we've done that, that wire is now contaminated with that nozzle dip. So we're going to want to feed out a little bit of wire. Go ahead and clip that off. I need to get myself a stand for my Mig Gun. Now that is a decent flux core weld. You can see on my ends there I need a little bit more end fill. Okay. And that's something that's kind of difficult to see when you're doing flux core. There we go. All the way around looks pretty good. I think I finally have my settings set in. I don't really see a whole lot of spatter. One little guy there. One little guy there. One little guy there, and it's gone. Alright, these settings are looking really good. So tacking these stoves up actually for me is fairly difficult with your TIG welder. You gotta get down in tight spaces, down in here and here. You have to have a lot of stick out. It's not easy to get in there. And also, you gotta hold your torch, hold your filler rod. It takes kind of a long time. So I want to see how quickly I can put this together. Now this does fit in these tight spots fairly well. It's not great, but this welder also included this guy right here. Now because this is flux core, I don't need to have any shielding gas. So we're going to give this tip a try, or this nozzle I should say, which is a pretty funky nozzle. Look at that. That's actually your contact tip right there. So there is the chance that if you contact the sides of this, you're going to probably burn out your tips. You have to be careful when you use this. Alright. I have it back up to tacking temperature. Let me get all my parts clamped down here. Make sure everything's nice and tight. Alright, let's start with some of these outside corner welds first. Didn't get contact there for a second, or ground, I'm not sure why. I do have my ground on the tabletop. There is a chance I'm not getting a good ground. Let's try that again. fine now. A little tack in the middle as well. Because this steel is so thin, you want to put multiple tacks on these parts. Otherwise, as you're welding, oh, it will warp. You'll see? The wire burned back onto my tip for a second there, and the tip kind of got caught. Let's try that again. More like it. Now, for welding these big gaps, what you want to do, start your tack on this part here, and then move your weld over to the other side. You start here on the thinner part, it'll just burn right through. Alright, now, the tricky spot's down in here. Let's see if I can get down in here, no problem. That fits very well, actually. Let's do over here. Beautiful. That was so easy. Really need to get a stand for that gun. There we go. We are all tacked up and ready to go. Just gotta put a few tacks along here. Using my TIG welder, I'd still probably be tacking these on. That is so much faster. That is beautiful. Alright, we'll get this out of the way, and maybe we'll put a few welds on this guy. Okay, let's go ahead and lay some beads. I have to be kind of careful with this guy because I'm not used to this welder. I'm not exactly sure what these welds are going to be like. So the next step in this process, what I have to do is I have to put on a weld here, here on the other side, because I have to put my legs on next, as well as my handles. So I typically run this weld here and then this weld. I think what we'll do is I'll try this guy vertical. We'll weld this guy straight across. And typically, when you're welding a butt weld, you want to have higher heat, lower wire. But I'm not exactly sure how this welder is going to run. And plus, I have to use dragging welding instead of pushing. Dragging your welds tends to make them a little bit hotter. So we're going to err on the side of caution there. I'm going to put some more tacks on here really quick before we get started. And as you can see, I have a set of 1, 2, 3 blocks on here. That's just so when I do this vertical down, I'm not going to burn into my table. Alright, let's go ahead and run this bead here. And let's hit that with a wire brush first. Let's do this correctly. Something to note. Let's leave this guy right here. Now, because this thing's been welding kind of on the hot side, I do have the heat on this turned down. I'm down to roughly what they recommend for 16 gauge. So we're going to go ahead and run this guy and we'll see what it looks like. And I already lost my line. I can't see where I'm going. Try that again. And we're burning through. So turn our heat down a little bit. All right. Whew, still burning through, my goodness. Turn the heat down and give us a hair more wire. It's better. Fill that hole in. Alright. Let's try this vertical down, corner to corner. Burn through again. Whew. We're getting a lot of spatter too. We probably got too much wire. Less heat, less wire. We're down to the recommended 18 gauge setting, which is kind of crazy. Tells me this guy runs a little bit hotter than what I'm thinking, which, as long as you figure your welder out, is fine. All right, let's try this again. Burn through again. My goodness. That is a nice looking bead though. I did not expect it to be that hot. The inside looks okay. I didn't make a mess of anything yet. So we're good. While this is here, I'm actually going to put a few more tacks right here. Make sure this thing doesn't warp too badly out of shape. So I am putting a lot of heat into this guy, and this is only 14 gauge steel. Alright. That MIG handling has become a priority. Alright, let's hit these with the wire wheel and see how they look. Most of that spatter came off, so that is good. Most of those beads are coming right off. So, flux cores welding, they tend not to be very pretty. Now this weld I tend to kind of grind down anyway. This one was our second weld, not too bad. A little bit of porosity there in the corner. That's probably just the nature of the flux core welder. Here's the side where I was constantly adjusting my machine. A little rough, passable, not too bad. Now, as I was welding, you may have heard those popping sounds. Those were the tacks that were just ahead of my welder breaking. So, again, this is a pretty hot welder. But that bead right there, we're just about dialed into where we need to be. Alright, well I think that's good enough for now. We're going to take a break for a second, and I'm going to come back and I'll give you folks my final thoughts on this welder. Okay everyone, I have an interesting update on the Vulcan Migmax 215. So shortly after I started the welding review of this video with the flux core, I noticed a strange problem that I was having. It seemed like suddenly the flux core wire wasn't feeding as quickly as it should into my puddle. Now, that's an important feature of flux core. If you don't get enough wire, you don't get enough flux, you get porosity. So I was getting kind of irritated, and I ran some tests, and with the wire setting maxed out on the manual settings and the wire feed speed all the way to its minimum, I was getting the same amount of wire feed. So naturally I was upset, took my welder back, got another one back 2 weeks later, started out welding fine, and then I encountered the same problem. At first, I thought it was the wire tension. Now, for the record, this thing does tend to like a little bit more wire tension. In the instructions, they say to have it between, let's see, flux core between 2 and 3. I have mine set on 3 and just a slightly past 3. So I think it does like a little bit more wire tension than they say. The other thing I noticed too was while I was messing with the welder, I looked over here on these settings here. So this has several different settings here. Flux cord, stainless steel, steel C25, and what that means is steel wire with 75% argon, 25% CO2, and then steel C100, which means 100% CO2 shielding gas, and then aluminum. So what I did, I put this on the C25 setting just to see what would happen, and lo and behold, under the manual settings, the wire feed speed again, was accurate. So keep that in mind when you use this machine, that if you have this set to flux core, the wire feed speed system does not work how it would for a normal welder. Now, I like my wire to run like a normal welder, so now when I run this guy under the manual setting, I have it under C25. However, if I'm using the Synergetic settings, which I do use for my stoves, I have it on flux core, O35, and then all I do to change my different speeds is adjust my heat. So for my vertical downs, I have it on the 14 gauge setting. For the butt welds, I have it down to the 16 gauge setting. For the outside corner vertical down weld, I have it down to the 18 gauge setting. And that all seems to work very well. I got good welds, good puddles, and no porosity. So that's an interesting little quirk to this machine. I just wanted to let you guys know about that. All right, we'll go ahead and finish the review here, and then I'll give my final thoughts. So here are my final thoughts on this tool. I am very happy. Now, I did have some problems, as I explained in a different portion of this video, kind of figuring this welder out. My biggest criticism of this welder is that the instructions are trash. They do not go into enough detail on how this machine functions. For example, I had to look up what the C25, C100, all that stuff meant. Now that I do have an understanding for this machine, I can run it fine, absolutely no problem. Works well on the Synergetic settings, except for maybe some of the lighter gauge steels, which is a problem that I have seen that most other people who use this welder have. This is a pretty sturdy design. This shell is almost identical to the same Miller machine of the same size, which leads me to think that maybe it's built by the same company, and just kind of the guts and electronics are built by a different company. So far, I've had this welder for about 3 weeks. I believe I've made about 4 stoves with it, as well as welded a few things here and there. And so far, it's working great. So if you folks are in the market for a wire feed welder, for whatever reason, just beginning welding, which is what would be good for a wire feed welder, I would recommend the Vulcan 215. Now, since I work in a garage, and I don't have a smoke eater, it gets pretty smoky in here pretty quick. Right now it's 15 degrees in the wonderful state of Wisconsin, so I have to weld with a fan on, my window above my welder open, and my garage door open, so I can blast all the smoke out of my garage. So I'll probably be investing 1 in a smoke eater here pretty quick, and 2, I may actually switch to solid core wire and get a 75-25 argon CO2 mix. Just that's what I'm used to, and find a spot to put the bottle. So there you go, folks. That is the Vulcan Migmax 215. Thank you, everyone, again, for everything you're doing for this channel. Thank you for your subscriptions and your thumbs ups, and please throw a few of those my way if you enjoyed this video. Any questions that you have, please post them in the comments below. I love the interactions that I'm getting now. People are sending me some pretty good questions, some good criticisms, and that's okay. I don't mind criticisms, neither negative nor positive. In fact, I welcome criticism. So thanks again for watching, folks. Have a great rest of your day.